Amen. You may be seated. I just think we need to thank the choir and Jerry and everybody one more time for this beautiful music this morning. So this morning we wrap up our sermon series on Good Enough. Just as a way of review, remember that I began our time together at the beginning of October asking the question, when did good enough become good enough? I'd seen that woman at the corner of Lindbergh up there near the Chick-fil-A trying to place a sign in the ground, and she got it in the ground halfway in a direction you couldn't read, and she stepped back from that sign and she looked at it and paused as if to say, well, that's good enough. And I drove away from that traffic signal thinking, when in the world did good enough become good enough? Over the last few weeks, we've acknowledged that sometimes in our world, good enough is good enough. That sometimes we just need to get things done and push through. I've admitted that my one-time addiction to perfection would cause me to not start something in fear that it wouldn't be perfect. And that sometimes I had to learn that I just needed to get it done. But I'm coming for full circle this morning, because as we spent time together over the past month thinking about how much is enough and when is good enough, it has occurred to me in our culture today that I'm far more fearful of us erring on the side of not being good enough. I'm far more afraid of us erring on the side of not being good enough than I am on getting caught up in who's good enough. I'm far more afraid that we are not going to strive for excellence than I am that we're going to overdo it. I'm far more afraid that we're willing to rest on our laurels than we are to reach toward the future with hope and expectation. And so this morning, I want us to wrap up this series thinking about that question again. When did good enough become good enough? And are we willing to be a good enough church? Or does God expect more? I offer for us this morning these words from Paul to the church in Philippi, the 4th chapter, the 8th and 9th verses. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence and if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Keep on doing the things that you have learned and received and heard and seen, and the God of peace will be with you always. Let me ask you a question this morning. Anybody ever had to have surgery, minor or otherwise? I've had to have surgery. Let me ask you a question. Do you want a surgeon who thinks that they're just good enough? How many of you drive a car? How many of you want a mechanic that thinks their work is just good enough? How many of you fly on airplanes? How many of you want a pilot or a mechanic or a designer of an airplane in which you're going to sit 30,000 feet off the ground? How many of you want any of those people involved in you being on an airplane to just be good enough? You get my point. There are times and places and people in our lives that we simply cannot accept, from whom we simply cannot accept good enough. Because sometimes good enough is a matter of life and death. Good enough just won't cut it in a lot of ways. And my fear is that in today's world, whether it be in the church or in government or in business, far too often we are willing to just say that something is good enough. In our own United Methodist Church, I've got some of the greatest minds in our denomination in our sanctuary this morning, and I think we would all agree that having steadily lost members since we formed in 1968 to today is not good enough. Something we're doing or not doing is not reaching the next generation to make disciples for Jesus Christ. What we've done for years is not good enough, and in this case, good enough is not good enough. Because quite frankly, brothers and sisters, making disciples is a matter of life and death. I've got folks in here that are in business, They run their own businesses or they work in large corporations. And as we've seen over the past few years, as our financial industries have fallen apart, as the economy has taken a turn for the worse, that good enough is just not good enough. We've got to be better. When Paul focuses us this morning, we think about these things that we must do to be good enough. Truth. You'll remember that at one point during this series, I talked about those three words, those three concepts, those three thoughts that drive me personally and in ministry. Those three words are integrity and service and excellence. Truth is a matter of integrity, being true to ourselves, being honest with each other about who we are and what we've been called to do. Truth is a matter of integrity. Personal integrity, corporate integrity. We must have integrity as a church. We must have integrity as a community. But all of that starts with a personal integrity, knowing who we are and who God has called us to be. Whatever is honorable. Now, I'm sure like y'all, I'm sure like me, y'all can't wait for Tuesday to come and go. I'll just be honest with you. I'm not sure I can look at another political ad from any candidate. In a day and age when we need people of honor and integrity, everybody is accusing the other of not having honor and of, in fact, lacking the basic integrity necessary to lead. I'll just be honest with you, as I look across the board, I don't see anyone out there good enough to uphold the principles on which this country was founded. But I pray and have trust in God that these men and women who do get elected, that if they will be on their knees in prayer, that maybe, just maybe, we can become the people in the country that God has created us and called us